Kesubos Daf Pei Daled contains one Mishnah which divides the Daf into two sugyas. The first sugya is what is the explanation of Rav who passes like Rav Shimon ben Gamliel in the case of somebody who gives up on a right which is his da'iraisa, that is the right of a husband to inherit his wife. The Gemara will offer four possibilities for that. Then we'll get to the Mishnah which introduce our second sugya, which is the halacha of what happens when you have property which is falling from a person who died, and there are three people claiming it: the inheritors, somebody who's owed money, and his wife. The property is not being held by any of them. Who gets it? We'll have a machlokes tanaim and a number of different cases and how we paskin in those cases. So let's begin. We've seen in our last Mishnah that there was a machlokes between the Tanakama and Rav Shimon ben Gamliel. What's the halacha if a husband gives away his right to inherit his wife? That is a right which he has. He inherits everything from his wife when she dies. There's going to be a machlokes whether that happens d'oraisa or d'rabbanan, but here we have that Rav Shimon Gamliel says that if he gives away that right, it's not chal. He still inherits his wife anyway. He's not allowed to give that right away. Says Rav, the halacha is like that. It's like him, but for a different, but not for his reasoning. So the Gemara wants to know, what does he mean when he says the halacha is like him, but not for his reason? The Gemara is going to offer four possibilities and have a problem on all of them before we finally settle on the right pshat. So the Gemara's first possibility is that Rav Shimon ben Gamliel's reasoning was that since he has a d'oraisa right to inherit his wife, he does not have a right to cancel a monetary d'oraisa right, and therefore the fact that he gave it away and he said, I'm not going to inherit her, it's meaningless, and he inherits her anyway. So Rav holds that that is true, that halacha is true, but not because a man does not have a right to give away his d'oraisa right. The reason is that because Rav holds that the right of a husband to inherit his wife is a d'rabbanan, and the rabbanan, the rights that are granted by the rabbanan are protected even stronger than the d'oraisa rights. Rav holds that the d'oraisa right you have the right to give away. And if it would have been a d'oraisa right, he has a right to be meichled. This is a right, the rabbanan, the right to inherit his wife, and the rabbanan made the halachos protecting there to kind of stronger, and therefore he does not have a right to give this away because it's the rabbanan. So therefore he holds the same halacha, but for a different reason. So what is the problem with this is that it's not true, and we know that Rav holds that a d'oraisa right, someone does not have the right to give away. And therefore it's not true to say that Rav doesn't hold that way. Where do you see that Rav holds that? So Umar says in the case of somebody who makes a deal with someone, he buys or sells, and they decide between them that they're going to give away the right of oino. If somebody's ripping someone off by more than a sixth, though, the halacha is d'oraisa that the sale, the deal is canceled. So here they said, I'm going to give away that right. So that is a d'oraisa right. And there you have machlokes Rav and Shmuel. Shmuel says you can give away the right for oina, and Rav says you can't give away. So you see that Rav says a right which is clearly d'oraisa, a monetary right, you don't have the ability to give away. So it's not correct to say that Rav doesn't hold that. Someone says therefore we need a new pshat. So therefore the Gemara wants to say maybe the pshat is as follows. He passes like Rav Shimon ben Gamliel who holds that you can't give away a d'oraisa right. Any d'oraisa right out there, you can't give it away. Just like we've proven, that's how Rav holds. However, Rav says that does not apply in the situation of a husband who wants to forego his inheritance from his wife, because Rav holds that that is not a d'oraisa, that's a d'rabbanan, and in a d'rabbanan, contrary to what we said earlier, now we want to say that you can give away a right that the rabbanan gave you. They did not make their halachos more protected, therefore you could give it away. So the Gemara says the problem with this is obvious, that this is not saying that he paskins like Rav Shimon ben Gamliel for a different reason. It's saying that he agrees with Rav Shimon ben Gamliel's reason, but he doesn't paskin like him. He holds that as far as Rav Shimon ben Gamliel said the husband can't give away his right to inherit his wife, that's not true, he could give it away. But the halacha, the reasoning of Rav Shimon ben Gamliel that you can't give away the d'oraisa right, that he agrees to. He just holds it doesn't apply here. So that can be the explanation of what we said before. So therefore, the Gemara says we need to have a third explanation. And the Gemara wants to try now as follows, to say that Rav Shimon ben Gamliel holds that you can't give away a d'oraisa right, but you could give away a d'rabbanan right. And that's why he says that a husband has a right, that a husband could give away his right to inherit his wife. That's d'oraisa. If it would be d'rabbanan, you can't. Rav says, no, I agree with that halacha, the husband can't give away his right to inherit from his wife, but I disagree with what you said, that that's only because it's d'oraisa. Even if it would be d'rabbanan, you still could. So therefore, I disagree with your reasoning, but your halacha is correct. So Mar says, this doesn't fit either. This is not Rav arguing on the reasoning of Rav Shimon ben Gamliel. He agrees with Rav Shimon ben Gamliel's reasoning, he just adds to it. Wouldn't be correct to say that he doesn't agree with Rav Shimon ben Gamliel's reasoning. So the Gemara therefore tries a fourth approach. And the fourth approach is to say that Rav Shimon ben Gamliel holds that you the husband cannot give away his right to inherit from his wife because it is a doiraisa, and you can't give away a doiraisa right. However, Rav agrees the halacha that he can't give it away, but not because it's doiraisa, but because it's derabanan. But here it's going to be slightly different than we said before. Rav says that the Rabbanans have the same protection as a deraisa, not a greater protection than a deraisa. Therefore, it comes out that Rav holds both things. He holds, like we proved earlier, that you cannot give away a deraisa right. And he holds here, you cannot give away a derabanan right. And we have to amend what we said before. It's not that the derabanan is stronger than deraisa, because the deraisa you can't give away either, but both are true. You can't give away a derabanan right or a deraisa right. And he holds that the right of a husband to inherit his wife is a derabanan, and that's why you can't give it away. So the Gemara says, okay, that's good, but now we have a problem because we have a proof that Rav does not hold that you can't give away. That we have a proof that Rav does not hold that a right of a husband to inherit his wife is a derabanan. You're telling me that he holds that that's derabanan. I'm going to prove to you that that's not derabanan. Where do you see that? It comes from an explanation that Rav said in a mysterious statement of Rav Yochanan ben Broika. Rav Yochanan ben Broika said in a Mishnah, again, Rav Yochanan ben Broika is a Tana, he said in a Mishnah that a husband has to return, who inherited his wife, has to return the land that he inherited to her family when Yovel comes around. At least we're assuming that his statement was referring to Yovel. Now, that's curious. The Gemara over there asks, how could you say that he has to return it at Yovel? Not only that, but he says return it at Yovel, and he could subtract some of the payment. So the Gemara says, what is this talking about over here? What does he hold? If he holds that the husband inherited doiraisa, so you don't have to return it at Yovel. You only have to return things that you got as a gift or that you bought at Yovel. An inheritance does not have to be returned at Yovel, so that doesn't make sense. And if he holds it's derabanan, so then it's a gift. The Rabbanan gave it to him, has the same lamdus and havana as a gift. He has to return it at Yovel, and he doesn't get any money for it. So where is there money involved? So Rabbi Yochanan ben Broika is hard to understand. So the Gemara says, Rav heard the following explanation. He said that really it's his da'iraisa. The Rabbanan said that he inherits, it's not the Rabbanan, it's da'iraisa, a husband inherits his wife's property. And therefore he does not have to give it back at all at Yovel. However, the Rabbanan said he should give it back, and the reason is because we're talking about where what he inherited is a cemetery, and it's a family cemetery, and it's very difficult and embarrassing for a family to use their family cemetery. Everybody wants to be buried in the cemetery that belongs to their family. Now you're going to say that the cemetery should go to a different family? The husband's going to bury his family there, and the wife's family is going to have to find themselves a new cemetery? That doesn't make any sense. So therefore, the Rabbanan said give it back. Now, they should pay for it. However, he should deduct from the money that he takes back from them the cost of his wife's grave, and that's because the husband has the obligation to pay for his wife's grave. He can't say that they have to buy the cemetery, including his wife's grave, if that's something he needs to buy anyway. So that's pshat in the brisa. Now this is a pshat that Rav says. The problem is that you see in here, we said that the husband's inheritance is deraisa. Rav had said that pshat of Yochanan ben Broika is that it's a deraisa, and therefore he really deraisa doesn't have to give anything back. So that doesn't fit with what you're telling me now, that Rav holds that a wife's inheritance, that the inheritance that a husband gets from his wife of her property is only derabanan. So Mor says that's not a problem. I'll tell you, really Rav holds that way. He holds that it's the derabanan, and even though he gave this explanation otherwise in Rabbi Yochanan ben Broika, that was just to explain Rabbi Yochanan ben Broika. But he himself disagrees and holds that it is really only derabanan. We now begin the next Mishnah, which discusses what happens in a situation where a man died, and there are three people claiming his property. That is, he owes money to someone who he borrowed money from. That's what we call the Bal Chayv. He had a wife who wants her ksuba, and he has Yorshim. He has inheritors who want to claim the property for themselves. So the halacha generally is, if people inherit land, they have to use the land to pay off the debts that their father owed. There is a shibud on the land. Here we're not talking about land, we're talking about movable objects. The halacha there is generally the movable objects that a person inherits they're not mortgaged to pay off the obligations that the father had. They do have a mitzvah to pay off his obligations, but their movable property is not mortgaged to pay it off, so people can't claim it. And over here, the issue is what happens when the movable objects were not in the possession of the father or of the Yarshim at the time. Instead, he had lent money to somebody, so that person has money that he owes, or he had given someone an object to hold as a pikadon, to either watch or to use. And therefore, there's property which belongs to the father, it's not in his possession, and therefore, when the father dies, it doesn't go straight into the possession of the inheritors. They're not holding it. The question is, a situation like this, everybody wants to get it. The inheritor says, I want to get it. The wife says she wants it for a ksuba, and the Baal Chav says he wants it for the money that he lent and he needs to be paid back. And here, so Rabbi Akiva says the same halacha applies. It goes to the inheritors, they have the right to get it. They you cannot take away metalton, you can't take immovable objects away from them to pay a chayv or to pay a ksuba, and therefore the same halacha applies as usual. Here, Rabbi Tarfon, though, says it's a little bit different. Since it's not in the possession of the inheritors, it's not a problem to take it away from them and use it to pay off the others. So who do you do? So what should you do with it? Who do you give it to? So Rabbi Tarfon says it does not go to the inheritor. It goes either to the bachov or it goes to the wife. Which one? So Rabbi Tarfon's wording is that it goes to the weaker of the two. Now the Gemara will explain what the weaker of the two means. So Rabbi Kiva says it goes to the inheritors. Rabbi Tarfon says it does not go to the inheritors. Now the second case of the Mishnah is where there were movable objects, but they were lying in a public place. The Gemara explains where it was, and therefore it's not in the possession of the inheritors. Again, Rabbi Kiva says it goes to the inheritors, and Rabbi Tarfon says it goes to the weaker of the two. But here, Rabbi Tarfon says that since it was in the public area, anybody could go grab it. And whoever's going to grab it first, whichever of the three will grab it first, he'll be the one holding it. You can't take it away from him. Now, what if the Balchov or the wife grab it and it's more than they deserved? So they have to give up some of the rest of it, and now they're holding. So here you have the same Machlokas. So Rabbi Tarfon says you give it to whoever is weaker, and which in this case refers to the other one. If the Isha grabbed it, you give it to the Balchov. If the Balchov grabbed it, you give it to the woman, to the Balchov grabbed it, you give it to the wife. And Rabbi Kiva says, no, it goes to the inheritors, just like we said before. Okay. Now, the Gemara first asks, why did we have to talk about where it was a loan and a pikadon? In our first case, we wanted to say that the inheritors aren't holding it. The father wasn't holding it. If the father would have been holding this property, it would have passed straight to the inheritors at the time that he died. We're talking about where it's in the possession of a third party, either as a loan or as a object that he's holding for them, a pikadon. The Gemara says, why do you have to talk about both of them? The Gemara answer is because it's a chiddush for each of them, for the opinions of both Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Tarfon, and that's as follows. A loan is not an object which exists. When you lend money to somebody, that enters his bank account, and that money no longer exists in the possession. It's not money which is in the possession of the lender. It is now the property of the borrower, and all the lender has is an obligation. He is owed money. However, if you lend somebody a horse, so then it's your horse, he's just holding on to it. So therefore, it's more in your possession, and therefore it's more likely to make sense to say that it has to go to the inheritors. If we would have just talked about the case of the horse, where it was being held by someone, so then Rabbi Akiva's position is much stronger. He says the inheritors still have it. It belongs to them. Could be that Rabbi Tarfon wouldn't argue. And if we would only talk about the case of the loan, so there, Rabbi Tarfon's position is much stronger because the inheritors don't have anything. The money doesn't exist. It is now part of the official bank account of the people who borrowed it, and all you have is an obligation. So it could be there Rabbi Akiva would not argue and say that it's still considered to be owned by the inheritors and they still are holding it. You can't take it away from them. Therefore, we have to talk about both cases to show that both opinions stand in both cases as well. The Gemara now asks, what is meant by the weaker of the two? So the Gemara says it's a machlokes. We have the same machlokes Amoraim as Tanaim. We have the opinions of Rabbi Yosi, Rabbi Chanina against Rabbi Yechanan. Same machlokes is Rabbi Binyamin against Rabbi Elazar. And that is, the first pshat is that the weaker one means the one who has the date on the shtar is later, and therefore he has less lekuchos, he has less purchasers that he could buy from, only whatever was sold after the date that he has. Therefore, we give him the right to grab. We give him the right to take this metaltalin. And the other side is that the weaker one refers to the woman. She is less likely to be able to go fight in court and to know which property she is able to claim from because she had a lien on it, and therefore we give it to her, and otherwise women would not be so eager to get married because they see it's hard for them to collect. So therefore we give them this right. Now the Gemara explains that which we said in the opinion of Rabbi Akiva in the second case, it wasn't clear from the Mishnah that even the part that they grabbed, even if somebody grabs the fruits that were lying around, it wasn't clear that Rabbi Akiva agrees, that Rabbi Akiva holds they can't do that, and that also has to go to the Yarshin. The Gemara clarifies that is what he meant, and that has to go to the Yarshin as well. So now the Gemara asks the question, does Rabbi Akiva not hold that holding on to something works at all? He says it always goes to the inheritors. It doesn't help if anybody, there's no situation in which you could hold something and take it away from the inheritors. The Gemara says yes. If the woman or the Baal Chayv grabbed hold of something before the death of the father, and therefore they're holding it even when the father was alive and he owed it, then they're allowed to keep holding. That's the only situation in which you could keep a grip on it and it doesn't go to the inheritors. If, however, it was not being held by the woman or the balchov, it goes to inheritors automatically upon the death of the father, even if it's in the physical hold of someone else who's holding it at the time, as long as it's not either of the people who are owed. Now, the Gemara says, in the opinion of Rabbi Tarfin, where whoever is holding it, where if it's being held by the Yisomim, they get to keep it, but otherwise, if it's not being held, then it goes to someone else. Where exactly does it have to be? When we said there's fruits lying around, where are they lying around that they're not in the possession of either the father or the inheritors? Because if it was in possession of the father, it would go straight to the inheritors in the instant that he dies. So there's a machlokes between Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish against Rav and Shmuel. Rav and Shmuel says that it has to be in a Rishus Harabim, that is a public area, doesn't belong to anybody. According to Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish, it could be in a Rishus Harabim, or it could also be in a Simta. Simta is an alley near Rishus Harabim where people step out of the Rishus Harabim if they need a quiet place to talk. Significance over there is that a kinyan does work there. You can do a kinyan mashiach in that area. In Rishus Harabim, you can't. So you may think that if you can do a kinyan mashiach there, at least Rav and Shmuel hold, that therefore the kinyan of the Yarshim works there in the instant that the father dies. It's not considered to be not held anywhere. However, Rabbi Yochanan and Shakish disagree and say that that doesn't count as anything over there at all. All right, now the Gemara discusses a number of incidents and how we paskin here. Again, the main issue is a machlokes between Rabbi Tarfin and Rabbi Kiva. If the Yarshim are not in possession of property at the time of the death of the husband, we're talking about movables, the time of the death of the husband of their mother, or the time of the death of their father, does it go automatically to the inheritors and you can't take away this property just like you can't take metaltalin to pay off a debt? Or because they're not holding it, is it usable to pay off the ksuba and the balchov? So the Gemara says there was a case that happened where a court paskin like Rabbi Tarfin that you can use it to pay off the debt. And the case came for Rish Lakish, and he made them return it. And he said this is the wrong halacha. They were not allowed to pass like Rabbi Tarfin. The halacha is like Rabbi Kiva, that it goes to the Yarshim. So versus Rabbi Yochanan said, you're making that Rabbi Akiva's opinion is like Shel Torah, that it's a deiraisa, that you can't, that even if a court rules that way, it's a mistake and it has to be returned. So Rabbi Yochanan obviously didn't hold that way. Someone wants to know what exactly is machlokes Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish. If somebody paskins like if someone paskins like Rabbi Tarfin, if a court paskins like Rabbi Tarfin, do you have to give it back? So what exactly are they arguing about? So there's a few different ways of explaining it. The first way of explaining it is that the question is, if a court makes a mistake in something which is an open Mishnah, what is the halacha? Do you have to return that or not? So Rish Lakish holds you have to return it. It's a Dvar Mishnah. It's an open rule that the halacha is like Rabbi Akiva against any of his chavirim, any individual of his chavirim one at a time. And Rabbi Yochanan says even if it's a Dvar Mishnah, you don't have to return it. If the court ruled that way, it stays the way. My second shot is to say they all agree that the halacha is that you do have to return something which is an open mistake. That's a Mishnah. The question is, when we say that the halacha is like Rabbi Akiva, is that only against his chaverim or even against his Rebbe? And Rabbi Tarfin was Rabbi Akiva's Rebbe. Therefore, according to Rish Lakish, the halacha is like Rabbi Akiva even against his Rebbe, who was Rabbi Tarfin. And according to Rabbi Yochanan, the halacha is according to Rabbi Yochanan, the halacha is not like Rabbi Akiva against his Rebbe, and therefore is no automatic rule that the halacha is like Rabbi Akiva against Rabbi Tarfin, and therefore you don't have to return it. Gemara's third shot is that everybody agrees that the halacha is like Rabbi Akiva only against his chaver, not against his Rebbe. And the question is, was Rabbi Tarfin considered to be Rabbi Akiva's Rebbe or not? He was a Talmud chaver, which is that he was somewhat of an equal, but Rabbi Akiva did learn a lot from him. And the question was, is he considered to be a Rebbe, and therefore the halacha is not like him, or is he considered, and it's not an open Mishnah that the halacha is like Rabbi Akiva, or is he considered to be a chaver, and therefore there is an open Mishnah that the halacha is like him. The fourth explanation is that Rabbi Tarfin was most definitely a chaver, and therefore it's an open Mishnah that there is no issue, is the halacha like him or not. However, the question is, the Mishnah that says halacha is like Rabbi Akiva against his chaverim, was that saying the halacha is like him, or just that we lean towards him, which means that you should lechatchila follow Rabbi Akiva, but if you did not, you most definitely don't have to change, because all we do is lean towards Rabbi Akiva, not necessarily is the halacha 100% like Rabbi Akiva. Now the Gemara brings an incident. The Gemara says that Rabbi Yochanan's relatives once got into this argument, and they were owed money by somebody, and he died, and they went and they grabbed a cow from an alleyway, and that was a cow that belonged to the person who owed them the money, and they grabbed it before it could go into the possession of the inheritors. They did exactly this case. Came to Rav Yochanan, and Rav Yochanan said, you did good, you can keep it, and halacha is like Rabbi Tarfon. And then they came before Rish Lakish, and Rish Lakish said you have to go give it back. The halacha is like Rabbi Kiva, it goes to the inheritors. It does not help that you grabbed it. Went back to Yochanan, and Yochanan said, what can I do? Rish Lakish is my equal, and he's arguing on me, so I can't help you in this situation anymore. All right, now the Gemara has another incident. The Gemara says that there was a cow herd of the inheritors, and somebody came and took a cow from them. It was a Baal Chayv, somebody who was owed money by their father. The father had died. This guy came and grabbed the cow from the herder. And so he took it and he said, oh, like Rabbi Tarfon, I get to hold on to it. I took it away before it ever went to the possession of the inheritors, and therefore he wants to hold on to it. However, they came before Rav Nachman, and the issue here was as follows. They were going to pass on like Rabbi Akiva. The question was, they said that they grabbed it before the death of the father. And even Rabbi Akiva agrees if you grab it before the death of the father, they get to hold on to it. So they came to Rav Nachman. They said they grabbed before the death of the father. The inheritor said, no, you grabbed after, and Rabbi Akiva would say that it's ours. So Rav Nachman said, do you have witnesses that they grabbed it? So they said, no, we don't have any witnesses to grab it. Said Rav Nachman, if so, they could always claim that it's legally theirs, nothing to do with the loan. They could say that they bought it from your father. The fact that they didn't say that gives them a migu, and therefore they're believed to say that they grabbed it before the death of the father, and therefore even Rabbi Kiva would say that they get to keep it, and the halacha is that they get to hold on to it. Now the Gemara asks, but hold on a second, how could they have a right to say that? They're holding on to animals. The halacha is that animals, just because you're holding on to them, it's not a proof that you bought it. You don't win by saying you bought animals, because animals, the fact that you're holding on to them doesn't mean they're yours. They could have just wandered into your field. It's not a proof that you bought it at all. They would not have one unless they had a proof that they bought it. So they don't have a migu. And my answer is that's small animals. But big animals, because they're being herded and they're being guarded carefully, they're not going to wander away. And if you're holding on to them, you do have a proof that you bought them. It's not an issue. Now, the Gemara brings another incident. The Gemara says there were people from the family of the Nasi. They went and they had a similar situation. They were owed money by someone. He died. And they grabbed a maidservant from the family. The maidservant was in a simta. She was in an alleyway. They grabbed her away, and they wanted to say that they collected, again, in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Tarfon. So the Gemara says that the case was brought in front of Rabbi Avo, Rav Chanina, and Rav Papi. Rabbi Yitzchak Nafel was sitting there. Rabbi Yitzchak Nafel was part of that group as well, and Rabbi Abba was sitting there. And they paskin like the Bnei Nasiya. They said you have a right to grab it. They paskin like Rabbi Tarfon. And Rabbi Abba said you are just giving in to the Bnei Nasiya. You're giving in to the Nasi because he is powerful. Don't you know that a case like this once happened, and someone paskin like Rabbi Tarfon and Rish Lakish made them give it back, and therefore you really don't have a right to paskin that way. All right. And there was another incident. The Gemara says there was someone by the name of Yemar Bar Choshu who was owed money by somebody. The guy died, and he had property. He had a boat in the river, and they went, and so Yemar sent a shliach to go grab the boat. The boat was considered to be a public area. It was not a possession of the father, and it wasn't possession of the inheritors, so therefore our whole sugya applies. He sent somebody to go grab the boat. On the way, he met Rav Papa and Rav Huna Bar Rav Yeshua. They were also on their way to grab the boat because they were also owed money by this guy. Rav Papa and Rav Huna Bar Rav Yeshua, he apparently got it first. So Rav Papa and Rav Huna Bar Rav Yeshua said to him, you can't grab it because you're not owed money. You're being sent as a messenger. And by you grabbing it, you're keeping it away from somebody else. The messenger has no right to grab if it's being kept away from other people. So he released it, and they both tried to grab it, but they each grabbed it in a different way. Rav Papa got in the boat and started rowing it, and Rav Huna Bar Rav Yeshua pulled the rope from shore. So each one said, my Kenyan is the stronger one. Moving the boat by rowing it is the stronger Kenyan, and I got the whole thing. And the other one said, no, pulling it by a rope is the stronger one, and I got the whole thing. So the Gemara says, first of all, it was not in Rishos HaRabim. And we know that Rav Shmuel says that it has to be in Rishos HaRabim. So this was what was said to them by Rav Pinchas Bar Ami. He met them and he said, you can't, this is not going to work. It's not Rishos HaRabim. So they said, no, when we got it, it was in the middle of the river where the current is strong, and therefore it is considered like Rishos HaRabim. The side of the river is like a simta, the middle is like Rishos HaRabim. Anyway, so they both came for Psak Terava, whose kinyan was the stronger one, and who's the one who grabbed it. So he said, you're both wrong. You're both a white goose that's taking people's shirt away because you're trying to steal somebody else's thing. We know that Rav Nachman said that the halacha is like Rabbi Akiva, and you only get to grab it if you grabbed it while the father was still alive. Here, the father had died already, and therefore neither of you have the right to grab it, so you both can go give it back.